Right off the bat, I want to thank everybody for sharing and sort of spreading the word about our channel. It's the only way. I mean, word of mouth is the best advertising that there is, and I so appreciate you letting your friends and your associates and your classmates and your teachers know about what we've got going on here. So, thank you. What I want to do in this video is answer some of the questions that started popping up like in the first 15 minutes. The first one being, why are you saw cutting it on the same day that you poured it? So there's two answers to that. First, because the plastic shrinkage is happening immediately. As soon as you put it down and that hydration starts, the concrete starts getting smaller and cracks are starting to form whether you can see them or not. So the second part of the answer to that question is because Dustin has a soft cut saw. A soft cut saw only weighs about 30 pounds or so. Now, I don't know if that's the number, but it doesn't weigh much. It's on nice wide wheels that distribute that load, and it is made to put that saw out on green concrete. The advantage to that is you're relieving the stress, you're giving it a place to crack as the cracks develop instead of waiting till the next morning to where the cracks are already going where they want to go and then you're cutting into a concrete that is significantly harder. The downside is you run the risk of marring the surface of your concrete. Now, the only mars that ever happen with a soft cut is lifting rocks, breaking out the edges of the saw cut if your saw is not tuned right, if it's not sharp, if it's not in line, if you're feeding it crooked, or if you have a little bad luck. Let me give you an up-close look at the spectrum of success and failure that you can expect with a soft cut saw when you're cutting it on the same day that you pour it. This is an example of essentially a perfect saw cut. Little bitty crack running out there that stopped. But this is, I mean, you can't do any better than that if you come back 2 or 3 days later with a big walk behind. That's a perfect cut. So probably, 80 or 90% of the saw cut on this floor is just like that. It's really good. And since I'm going to come back and put a joint filler in here that'll bring it right up to level so the dust doesn't get in there over time, it's perfect. But let me show you the handful of spots, or an example of the handful of spots where, well, you know what? It's just not quite perfect. This cut right here shows pretty much the whole spectrum. We've got a medium quality on the edges of this saw cut over here. It starts to ravel. You can see it was wanting to dislodge a little bit. And it comes along and it gets progressively worse as we get to this intersection. And right here you can see that rocks started pulling out. That little spacer is put in there to stop that from happening. And then we had a full-fledged blowout right there, which is going to have to be filled with the joint filler that I put in. And then gradually moving over towards the wall, the cut gets better. But here's the takeaway. That's okay, because the crack control in this little garage floor, now 30 days after it was laid down, is almost perfect. And what I mean by that is, yep, this floor is cracked, and all the cracks except one so far are in the bottom of the saw cuts. Let me show you. This saw cut stopped right here with a soft cut, and I finished it the next day with a skill saw. And look at that. Beautifully cracked, exactly where we want it to. Same thing right here. Beautifully cracked, right where we want it to. It's the same way everywhere that I can see the end of the saw cut presenting. There's only one spot in the floor where at this point a crack has shown up in the surface where I would have preferred it didn't show up, but it is acceptable. Let me show you. Now you may remember that I talked about the inside corners on a foundation focusing the stresses of the shrinking concrete. I have been educated by you guys that creates a stress riser. What a great phrase that is. But we've got two corners right here, and I was trying to relieve both of them with a little shortcut, but it didn't do it. So the stress riser is putting a crack right off that inside corner that's running out this way. This inside corner created a stress riser that's putting a crack right over to here, shortest distance. But frankly, my dear, if that's all we get for visible surface cracking in 600 square foot, tightly burned garage slab that's going to be nicely caulked, is as smooth as a piece of glass, I'll take it. So the second big comment is, man, what are you doing blowing silica dust into the air with a leaf blower and without a respirator? Okay, that's a fair comment. And thanks for placing comments like that, because maybe that will offset the bad example of me doing that. Here's the deal. When I got ready to blow that stuff out, I went to the truck and my respirator wasn't there. So this is one that I'm going to leave on the job. The single filter one that I have, I'll leave in the shop. And I recommend you do something like that, because otherwise, sometime, you're going to get caught without what you need to do the job safely. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.